Well, hello everyone. This is going to be my first, not live video, but contemporary video in over a month. I worked all throughout the month of May, and I did not have my laptop. Normally, when I work, I'm able to record videos at least occasionally and upload them at least occasionally. But this time, since I did not have my laptop, I was not able to do either. I had a camcorder that I recorded several videos on, and I'm debating whether I should upload them or not. They're now be 2 or 3 weeks old, and I'm not sure if I really want to upload them. There's one I did, circumcision video. As soon as I got off work, within a day, I uploaded that, and then people were commenting, "Welcome back. It's good to see you again." I went on vacation. My family rented a cabin in northern Michigan on the Osable River, and I spent the week there. And although that's relaxing and nice, you also don't get anything done. Um, Fortunately, they're not very health conscientious, but the result of that is that most of the food we eat tends to be meat. So it was very paleo friendly, although I'm not a huge, well, I like paleo, but I'm not saying it's the only thing or anything. Anyway, so this is kind of like the first contemporary video. I don't expect to be gone for extended periods. I will say in about a week is Porkfest, and I am planning on going. Um, Some of you I know are going to be there, and it will be good to see you again. For those of you who I met last year, and for those of you who I haven't met, who I likely will, it will be good to meet you as well. I encourage people to go if they can. Obviously, that's a subjective evaluation that people have to make. People have to make judgments about, I mean, contrary to the myth, most libertarians seem to be very poor, or at least, you know, tight on the money. And unless you happen to live very nearby or have somebody able to subsidize you, that can be quite an expenditure, not just in terms of what you spend, but what you don't make in the process. But it is worthwhile. I know my first, the video I made after Porkfest last year wasn't entirely glowing, but it wasn't bad so much as I was surprised that not everybody there was an ANCAP. But that does not imply that nobody there was an ANCAP. Most of the people there, or at least a very large majority, were a lot of very smart people, a lot of very interesting people, a lot of very interesting discussions, a lot of people from around the world. In many ways, Porkfest is essentially like Liberty Moot. If you watch Lord of the Rings, all the Ents get together, and they call that Ent Moot. Well, this is like Liberty Moot. I think it's probably the biggest libertarian event in the world on an annual basis. There are competitors, the Mises Institute's summer classes, there's Libertopia, Hans Hermann Hoppe's events, property and freedom organization that they usually meet in Turkey. That's a pretty big deal. But Porkfest, I think, is probably the biggest. It's kind of a very eclectic mix of vacation, letting loose, but also intellectual stimulation. It's in a very nice setting, and it's got a very laid-back atmosphere. There are lectures, sometimes very informative, very technical lectures, but at the same time, they're usually selling food in the background and people coming and going. People drinking, doing drugs, having guns, buying and selling, a lot of market activity, a lot of good discussions. So I really enjoyed it. I at least want to go one more time. I'm getting to the point now, though, when I do kind of think, okay, I have to, ration my expenditures of vacation time. I don't know if I will continue to go to Porkfest every year, but I definitely wanted to go again. And if you have never gone, I certainly encourage people to do so. In fact, actually, I was originally thinking that I was going to make a video about something else here, and then I realized I wanted to mention Porkfest, and now I think I am officially deciding at this exact moment that this is just a Porkfest video. Now, this is a little bit late in the game. It starts on the 17th, 19th. I don't remember, about a week, so less than a week. Uh, so, if you're in the UK or something, unless you already have your passport all ready to go and a couple £1,000 already, it's probably out of the question. But if you're in the area, I definitely say check it out. Or if you have the time. Last year actually I did not make a point of scheduling to go. I didn't tell my employer that I wanted the time off, It was just serendipity that I actually had the, I was working about a week before then. I realized I was going to have a decent amount of time off, and I think I bought my tickets the last day that I worked. And this year was different. I made a conscious decision way back in the winter. I said I want to go, not just to Porkfest. I'm taking the whole month off essentially. And I started telling my employer, and he's not my employer. I'm a subcontractor. I don't have to work. I can just say I'm not working. But I don't want to burn any bridges. So I've been saying, look, I'm taking this time off, and I will try and help you as much as I can to bridge that gap while I'm gone. And he didn't entirely take me up on that offer, or at least as much as I think he should have. But in any event, I got off a few days. I wanted to get off on the last day of May. I think I worked until June 2nd or 3rd. Maybe drove home on the 4th. I'm not. Even that was a while ago now. It seems like you really veg out. When I am very much more productive in my personal advancement when I'm at work. Um, I think it's mostly because I have a set schedule, and then even though I'm working, and sometimes the work is very time consuming and doesn't allow a lot of time. Like the last couple days that I worked, I was unable to read, unable to do any exercises, just work, and then try and eat in the moments between. But it's usually not that busy, but it was for a couple days there, which meant it felt really good when I finally finished. Anyway, I definitely, and I should have uploaded a Porkfest video like a month ago, but I didn't have a computer. I couldn't upload anything, so I have not done that. But I am doing it now. I look forward to meeting any of you who are planning on going who I haven't met. Look forward to meeting those of you who I've known for a while. I always find it very interesting, and I've only had this experience a few times where you meet somebody that you know online, sometimes people you've known for years. I'm really looking forward to. I'm going to be carpooling there. I'll keep it private, so I won't say who with. But if you see this, you know who you are. I'm really looking forward to that. Like it's a very interesting experience to meet people who you've known online for a long time, to meet them in real life. It's just a much more involved, complete, experience than just text here and there, and even these two-dimensional videos that we tend to see from time to time. So definitely check it out. If you cannot go to Porkfest, I would consider doing it again next year, looking into what that's going to take for you. I mean, this is not a moral obligation by any means, and maybe you've gone before and you just didn't like it. That's fine too. I can understand that. But I enjoyed it, and I think it's very cathartic to meet people who agree with you. That is something that I think we all should strive to do. Obviously, it's good to quote-unquote convert people, but you don't want to have all your social interactions, even ones that are about politics and philosophy, to be antagonistic, give and take arguments. It's nice to have people where you can just have really an honest discussion without having the burden of realizing that you are trying to persuade or be persuaded by the other person, at least in any major way. And that's not doing this, meeting other people, doesn't require Porkfest. Most places, I think, there are other options, although not nearly as good. I've always had good luck looking online, looking for Young Americans for Liberty or Campaign for Liberty or Ron Paul meetup groups, of finding people who are very much of like mind. Any town with a college, there's a very high probability you'll be able to do this. When I worked in Texas, it was a very simple matter. I just looked up the Young Americans for Liberty in the local university, and that ended up being probably a few dozen people. A high proportion, more than half, were ANCAPs. I mean, I remember the first day I met them, they were having dinner at some restaurant, and I just did raise of hands. How many of you would identify as ANCAP? And it was like 70%. Likewise, in my hometown, there's a university here as well, and I looked up there. they're Young Americans for Liberty, and that had already gone from the metamorphosis from young conservatives to anarcho-capitalists sometime before I even arrived, at least for most of the members, and um, that's you really hit it off with people like that right away. So I encourage people to do that. Now, if you don't have that option, stuff like Porkfest is a good alternative, potentially anyway. So, and it's from all over the world. It's interesting because ostensibly the Porkfest is about the Free State Project, and it's interesting to me how nominal that is in the truth of the event. When you go to it, obviously there's Free State Project literature, and it is administrated at some very vestigial level, but and there's an acknowledgement that it's about the Free State Project, but it's really not. You're not getting pushed all the time. You're not registering with the Free State Project. The program is typically not about, the vast majority of the lectures are not explicitly about the Free State Project at all, although it wouldn't be uncommon for the speakers to reference it. It'd be hard for them not to, given the circumstances. But it's much more libertarian general, with a strong emphasis on voluntarism. I prefer anarcho-capitalism. Voluntarism is kind of the more, I don't want to demean it by saying trendy, but it's the more popular term, I guess you would say, at least among the denizens of this event. I don't have a problem with the term so much as I don't particularly like to use it. But that's the ideological bent of most of the people who are going to be there. Most of the speakers who are going to be there. And not everybody literally, which surprised me, but that's fine. It's not terrible to have to rub shoulders with minarchists. Apparently, we should be so lucky in our regular lives if that was the case. So, yeah, there were a couple other videos I did want to make, and they just don't seem pertinent any longer. Noam Chomsky even said some crazy things. Some other liberals, as usual, say some crazy things. Just very briefly, I saw somebody, Stefan Kinsella, posted an article, 10 things that liberals or libertarians and conservatives agree about, and one was that they believe that a evil capitalist can own a donut of land around your property, and then then they can just charge a toll that's so expensive that you'll go bankrupt. And I mean, if that's the level of criticism of libertarianism, I think there are few things that could speak better in its favor than that. And they explicitly said use Blackwater. Some company's going to have, and it's just like, okay, first of all, what about tunnels, or bridges? What about they don't think that they should be able to steal land, so they would have to buy it from the previous owners, and it's unclear exactly why one can assume that they would just be able to buy. Buying and selling is not a matter of there's a price and then anybody who fronts that money then gets whatever is offered. It is a consensual transaction between two parties, and so it is very plausible, and this is especially true in cases of land, especially when there's domiciles on the land where people say it is not for sale at any price. It may be that each of your neighbors sold their homes for $100,000, and yours is considerably more dilapidated than their homes, and you may refuse to sell it at 100,000 or 200 or 300 or any sum. So the assumption that these donuts, would just be, the argument really is kind of hard to criticize because they don't specify how, this criticism about donuts, is it going to be super kind, like, is everyone going to have a donut be placed around their house, or is the criticism that it might happen half the time, or is the criticism that it might happen sometimes? I think the last option is totally plausible. That can happen. I mean, when we're talking about the entire United States and or the entire world, and you're talking about tens of millions or even a few billion domiciles or pieces of property, hell, it's not impossible, thunder, to think that there'd be a couple donuts that are created. However, it's implausible to argue that that is going to usher in the end of society. The other, and that's kind of a, what would that fall into? Where you cannot concoct a scenario and you invalidate an entire system because in some very marginal way some people would be potentially harmed. I don't know of any system that avoids that. You're going to tell me the government, that nobody can potentially be harmed in the government? Obviously not. The other, the more, for this to be a specific argument against libertarianism, they'd have to say, look, in a libertarian society, everybody or a large majority of people, or a tipping point of people would have to be susceptible to the donut enclosurement, and that this would, that would invalidate. I don't see how. I mean, there's some really weird, well, not weird, complete uh, rejection of the economic consequences of trying to do this, even assuming that they could have willing sellers, which is not something that one can just assume. Uh, what kind of toll could they possibly expect to reach out of the extortion of paying people like Blackwater? Those are people who are so expensive that the entire net worth of your average person in their average domicile is not is not going to justify the expenditure in that kind of muscle, so to speak. In fact, the most valuable asset that they're going to have is their home. But if that home is only valuable as an asset if you're not being taxed to death to use it, who's going to buy a home? And so the mafia says, look, here's this home. The previous owner, we surrounded him with a donut and we charged him these huge tariffs, and he went bankrupt and he had to sell, or we murdered him and he had to sell, or he had to sell that, oh, yeah, then I think I'll buy that property. No, they're not going to buy that property from a person who's going to expropriate that. They would be retarded to do so. People, if they're so stupid that they would buy such a house, then that person should not be voting, because that person has some kind of time preference, rational ignorance to the extent they, would jump into a pool with a great white shark, or shoot themselves in the head to make a joke, or somebody who is clearly a moron to the extent that there is no social system that they would not be horribly harmed by. So there isn't really any economic rationale for this, unless you have a gold mine. In certain situations, yeah, if you have a gold mine, or you have a ton of oil, or there's something about your land that's exclusive to you that raises its value far beyond just you have a house there and you live there. And that's a different situation, as of course is one that's not as common, and it's not likely to, pull the rug out of an entire society. So there's that problem. But then the other problem is, how is this juxtaposed? Let's just assume, okay, yeah, they're gonna spend millions of dollars on Blackwater, and they have enough Blackwaters apparently to surround every single house in the entire world, so that everybody's at risk of having a donut, or a huge majority. I mean, yeah, let's say 10% of the households. Okay, that's 300,000. Well, no, what is 10% of the households? It's probably, I just want to estimate here, 15, 20 million houses. Okay, they're going to have an entire Blackwater team surround every house after they buy a donut around every single house. So how many? They have an army that's larger than the standing army of China and the Russia and the U.S. and every country in the world put together, so they can expropriate houses? Like, no, governments control entire continents with less resources than that. So why is it, the predicated scenario is kind of one where, well, they could take over, a large part of the society, or at the very least aggress against homeowners, and all they would need would be armies far larger than current governments have. Is that is that really a plausible scenario? Does that make any sense at all? Is that not completely retarded? Is it just me who finds that totally ridiculous, that scenario? And who are they going to sell it to? All the other people that they robbed of all their wealth? I mean, or is this, they're only going to do this to a couple people? And if they only do it to a couple people, then there's a problem. Their kin, their defense organizations, whether they be for-profit militia, or for-profit companies, or militias, or just their own. I mean, people, look, if you're going to treat people like shit, you're going to surround them, and then, I mean, just the totally ridiculous scenario where they just surround somebody's house, put up guards around, build a fence and a gate that costs more than the house is even worth, and says we're gonna, blah blah blah, that they are basically declaring war on that person, and they would need to have more firepower at their disposal than all of their potential victims and all the potential sympathizers of their victims, and that doesn't work, not even for the government, let alone for a private agency. But then I think the biggest problem with this, and I wasn't going to talk about this, but I don't want to upload 2 videos, so I'm putting it in here. This completely ignores that it's worse with the government, because the government doesn't need to fucking buy a donut around your house, and it doesn't need to hire Blackwater. It taxes you, and if it wants to take your land, all it has to do is say eminent domain. That's all it has to do. It doesn't need a reason. It doesn't need to set up a toll booth. It doesn't need to build a fence. It just tells you you have to leave, and we're taking your land. And they can take it for any reason, as long as they say it's in the public interest. That's kind of a new thing since the Kilo case. Before that, there was this kind of general understanding that if the government was going to take your land, then the government should utilize that land itself. Now, hard question, how do you decide what's in the public good? In effect, that means whatever the government says, which logically, obviously, has enormous moral hazard and gives leeway to the government to do literally anything. In effect, that means it can do anything, and saying public interest or community interest is just the magic word that you need to say. And I was just actually listening to the great audiobook, Our Enemy, the State by Albert J. Nock, which I will just formally say here is a must-read. Or if you don't want to read it, Mises Institute has it on audiobook. I bought it for $1. It's great. I listened to it on the car driving up to home. Anyway, he says, if they're going to expropriate your property, what do you expect them? They can't tell you, we're expropriating your property because we have avarice and we're self-interested and we want to aggrandize our own political class. They can't say that. They're never going to say that. Liberals have this thing where they're waiting for the government to tell them that that's what's going on. Like, well, no, they're not. They're not exploiting us because they say it's for the common interest, and so that must be what's really going on. No. They can lie. In fact, they have the only way they can do. If they are going to take advantage of you, they are going to say it's for the common interest. So the fact that they say it's for the common interest is not really good evidence by itself either way. And then you have to start analyzing, is there some kind of logical framework or empirical way to determine whether what they're doing is in the common interest or not? Or is the common interest even a definite thing that can be defined? And if it's not, then it can't be a justification, because it can mean anything. And that's what it means. That's what the Kilo, they are talking about. The liberals like to imagine, roads and big indoctrination camps where they teach you how good the government is, called schools, and a lot of them like military bases too. Although that's not what gives them the biggest boners. That's mostly conservatives. But the government holds itself to no such restriction. The government makes no such promise and has explicitly said, look, we can take it for any reason as long as we say it's for the common good. And that includes taking it and giving it to the supposed antithesis of liberals, the rich capitalists. Famous case in Detroit, they took a whole bunch of poor black people's homes and they gave it to General Motors. Or to a shopping mall. Or military factory. They don't give it to puppy factories. They don't give it to well, maybe they give it to Planned Parenthood. I don't know, but they can give it to anybody that they want. All they got to do is say the magic words. And like so many liberals are so dumb, like, well, they said it's for the public interest, and that can't be questioned apparently. But just look at that. All they need to do is say eminent domain. They don't need to go to the trouble of building a donut. They don't need to hire Blackwater. All they got to do is say eminent domain, and in the eyes of the people, most of them anyway, they can do whatever they want. How is that not even worse than the ridiculous? And this thing is, like, the free market donut scenario is patently absurd on every level. On every level, it's absurd. But even if it was true, it wouldn't be not as bad as the actual practice of the government. In the explicit practice, this is not my libertarian interpretation. It is the government has eminent domain. It can take any property it wants for any reason at any time, as long as it says it's for the common good, for the public interest or whatever. And liberals are so gullible. This is, oh, libertarians are so incorrigible and they're just so idealistic. If the government, but for a liberal, if the government says it's doing X for X, then that's the truth. You know, like they're the wizened by years of experience and hard-headed practicality that they fucking believe it when politicians tell them that they are taking something valuable. If they're going to take something valuable, land, property, money, they're going to say it is for your own good or the good of the public. Even because a lot of times it would be a stretch. We're going to demolish your house for your good, but they can say although lots of liberals would fall for that, but the one that all of them fall for is if they say it's for the common good. The nebulous catch-all phrase that cannot be defined. I mean, it cannot be defined in literal, practical terms. You can talk about, these are the flowery rhetoric that I like to paint a picture with. And then I say, okay, so when it comes right down to it, does that mean they can take my house, my mailbox, my dog? Where's the line? Is there a line? What's the non-arbitrary delineation of the practical power that you're talking about? And they don't have one. They don't have one because it doesn't exist. They're just using flowery rhetoric, and they have to, and Albert J. Nock was pointing it out in Our Enemy of the State. That's how they have to do it. That's how it's going to be done. You're going to be expropriated, and it's going to be for your own good or for the good of society. That's how they're going to say it, and so you shouldn't be persuaded by that. And people are, because of the whole idea of Nock says republicanism. Most of us, I think, would say just democracy. The idea is, well, it's not the government's not stealing from us because the government is us. It's of the people, by the people, for the people. So, it's in a weird way, I'm just saving it for myself. It's like if it takes my home, that's really like me foregoing consumption to save for the future because the government is I. Totally ridiculous, completely naive, ahistorical, and theoretically nonsensical. So, no, they had like 10 things that they listed about what conservatives and libertarians, and of course that whole the title of that entire argument of that entire paper was just guilt by association. They're the same. I think I started this video by saying I agree. Apparently I agree more with conservatives than I do with liberals. Well, I don't see how. Liberals are so stupid and so horrible in their rhetoric, whereas conservatives, their rhetoric isn't always that. It's horrible when it's foreign policy, but the domestic stuff, it's only half horrible or 3/4 horrible. But the liberals, it's like, not only is it horrible, it's fucking retarded. It doesn't even make sense. Like, I can't get, because the guys who wrote this paragraph, like, they actually had, it wasn't like poetry or anything great writing, but like there weren't big mistakes in it. Like, it had paragraphs and indentations, and I'm like, okay, like, so this guy has, like the grasp of the English language that's at least like an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old, and like 8-year-olds and 9-year-olds, I think, should be able to see that this doesn't make a whole, you should be able to explain to them, hey, what about blah blah blah, and they'd be like, oh yeah, maybe it's not a good idea. But liberals, they write this post, it gets published, and it's like a popular, this is, I don't know if this is where all the most intellectual liberals go or not. They probably go and read Noam Chomsky, and where he talking about if he just says private tyranny over and over again, well, private and tyranny, keeps saying it, they're the same, private and tyranny, it's the same thing. No, and again, just to all due respect to somebody who's decently anti-war, all the evil things that anyone has ever claimed about any corporation that ever existed is absolutely nothing in comparison to even the most mundane of governments. Never mind the most dramatic example. You could just the U.S. government or the Canadian government. You tell the Canadians, tell that to the fucking Indians. Tell that to the people who die in government hospitals, or the 130,000 people who get put onto the Liverpool care package in the NHS in the UK, where they die. The majority of those people who have treatable illnesses, treatable by the technology available, and they just don't want to spend the money, so they die. Health shouldn't be about profit, and we don't want people to die because they don't have enough money, but they do in the UK at least 100,000 times every single year. How is that not tyranny? What corporation kills 100,000 people per year? And all the worst depredations of corporations, all of them, come from the state. The state aggrandizes corporations, some of them, and subsidizes them and protects them. And they clamor for that protection. The entire progressive era is, in effect, corporations begging the government to protect them from the free market, which is enormously erosive. Some of them do well, but most of them don't. And Chomsky can't see that. But even if we accepted, the worst things corporations did are free market, that does not make them as bad as governments. And just saying public tyranny or private tyranny, private tyranny, private tyranny, it's like a broken record. This guy is supposed to be like the most intellectual liberal in the entire country? Is that really? Is that the best they can do? I don't, and I know what it is with somebody like Chomsky is people, it's nodding. I already agree with this, and so he's a genius because I'm reading something I already agree with. It doesn't matter that it's stupid. That doesn't make any sense. And I agree with Chomsky on some things. And war is a big enough issue that I'm willing to concede, okay, yeah, Israel sucks and we shouldn't give aid to Israel and we have an empire and the wars are bad. Gotcha. Okay, that doesn't mean then the state should run everything. Oh, I'm an anarchist. Yeah, the anarchist who wants the state to run everything and then the state will dissolve. Because that's a really great idea. That's never been tried before. No. Well, I wasn't going to bring up the cliched examples, so I won't. But, how does that logically make any sense? And how does that empirically make any sense? It doesn't. And that's I guess Chomsky's probably higher than these guys that I'm referencing. Someone's going to ask for the link. I'm not going to be able to find it. This all happened weeks ago. But probably if you just do a Google search like how libertarians and conservatives are the same, 10 reasons or something like that. The whole thing is let's pair them, because libertarians are just like conservatives. No. And actually liberals are just like conservatives in a lot of ways, in a lot of important ways, as they fucking make excuses for torture and murder and empire and dictatorship and rent-seeking. I mean, look, I don't know how many just still love Obamacare. Look, they're telling us we have to be customers to corporations. And among the most evil corporations liberals imagine, the insurance companies. The companies that profit by death and suffering, as they like to pretend. Actually, which is ridiculous. They make money because they help people. If they didn't do that, people wouldn't go to them, unless, of course, they were being forced to go to them, which is what the government is now doing. And that, most liberals are too stupid. They don't even know what's going on. There's a couple out there who would not agree with Obamacare in that regard, who would say they wish it was just a direct, socialist system, because that's really good. That works out fine. But that's, that's the Glenn Greenwalds of the medical industry among liberals. They don't exist. They're like the gadflies that they just want to swat. They want to get rid of those people much more than they want to listen to them. So they're stupid. What they talk about is ridiculous. I am always reassured. I am buoyed in my my belief that what I'm onto some moniker of truth that other people are not onto. I'm not saying like everything I know is 100% true and I'm infallible. Absolutely not. That's not the case. But when I see that the people who are arguing against me, this is what the level of their argument. This is where it's at. This is their great counterpoint to the libertarian critique of society. Now, like, okay, that's it. That's the best that can be mustered. That's the only thing that's getting mustered. Then I'm like, okay, I must be onto something. So if you don't like dealing with liberals all the time, you don't like dealing with conservatives all the time, and you got the time and you have the money, I would recommend Porkfest. And so if you go, I will see you there. It'll be, come up, say hello, and I'll talk to you, as I will be talking to everybody that I possibly can. And if you can't, I don't know. I'll see you some other time. All right. I'll talk to you all later. Bye-bye.